Welcome to LieLab, and over the next hour I'm going to flip one lie after another, the kind you've believed your whole life, mashed to a pulp with real data and real studies. Things about your body, about space, about the kitchen, about your car, about your phone. And you do plenty of them every single morning without even realizing it. Today you're going to say, "There's no way. I've always done this." It's not your fault. We were all taught the same thing. Subscribe and hit that bell because this is an hour with no breaks. Let's get started. You say it 100 times a day and swear it's the most Argentine thing there is. Dead wrong. Ciao comes from the Italian ciao, and ciao comes from the Venetian dialect il ciao, which literally means slave. Yes, it was an old courtesy phrase, something like your servant at your service. Over the centuries, it wore down, lost its weight, and became a loose greeting for both hello and goodbye. The Italian immigrants who filled up the Rio de la Plata brought it over on the boat right along with Milanesa and vermouth. So when you say a good old Argentine ciao, you're using a centuries-old Venetian word. You just called half the country your servant without knowing it. Nothing is more Rioplatense than an imported greeting. You leave the room and keep the fan running so it stays cool in there. You're wasting electricity for nothing. The fan doesn't lower the room's air temperature by even 1 degree. All it does is move the air so the sweat on your skin evaporates. And that evaporation is what gives you the feeling of coolness. With no skin in front of it, it cools nothing. Worse, the little motor generates a bit of heat, so a fan running in an empty room technically warms it up slightly. It's the same as blowing on soup. It doesn't lower the temperature of the pot, it just moves the air near the liquid. If there's nobody sweating in there, turn it off. The fan doesn't cool down rooms. It cools down people, a body in front of it, or it's doing nothing. You flush with the lid up and go on with your life like nothing happened. Big mistake. When the water rushes down, the toilet shoots out a fine cloud of invisible droplets loaded with bacteria. In 2022, a team at the University of Colorado used lasers to film that column and found that the particles shoot upward and reach more than 5 feet in height within seconds. That means they go straight to your toothbrush, your towel, and the floor. The fix is terrifyingly simple. Put the lid down before you flush. That spray stays floating in the air for several minutes. It's not paranoia, it's fluid physics. Close the lid before you flush. And stop sharing your popcorn with the toilet. You were taught that a meteor wiped them all out millions of years ago, and that was it. End of story. Incomplete. Dinosaurs are alive, and there's one pecking around on your balcony right now. Birds are dinosaurs, direct descendants of the theropods, cousins of the fearsome velociraptor. Science today doesn't even debate this, it's a given. That means there are roughly 11,000 species of living dinosaurs flying around the planet. The sparrow, the pigeon, the ovenbird, the chicken in your schnitzel. What went extinct 66 million years ago were the non-avian dinosaurs, the big ones. The feathered branch got away and it's still here. So next time you see a chicken, treat it with respect. You're looking at the latest chapter of a 200 million year saga. You upload your photos to the cloud and in your head they float somewhere ethereal. Weightless, with no physical location. Total lie. The cloud is the heaviest warehouse in the world. Your photos, your messages, and your videos live on hard drives stacked inside enormous data centers. Buildings full of servers that consume electricity like a small city and need giant air conditioning systems so they don't melt down. It's estimated that these data centers use around 1 to 2% of all the electricity on the planet. And that number is climbing. When you send a photo to the cloud, you're actually sending it to an industrial building that could be on another continent. The cloud doesn't float. It weighs something. It consumes power and it has a mailing address. You drain the pasta and run it under the tap to get rid of the stickiness. Stop right there. You're throwing the best part down the drain. That whitish film left on the noodle is starch, and it's exactly the natural glue that makes the sauce stick. If you rinse it, the sauce is going to slide right off, and you'll end up with noodles on one side and sauce on the other. Italian cooks wouldn't dream of rinsing. In fact, they save a cup of the cooking water, which is full of that starch, to help bind the sauce. The only exception is a cold pasta salad, where it does make sense to stop the cooking process. For everything else, straight from the colander to the plate, no rinsing. That film isn't dirt, it's the sauce's best friend. You bet on it at the bar. Capital of the United States, New York. You lost the bet. The capital is Washington, a city built specifically to be the seat of government, and it doesn't even belong to any state. New York was the capital, but only for a short stretch between 1785 and 1790, when George Washington took office there. Afterward, they moved it. What happens is that New York is the most famous city, the one from the movies, the skyscrapers and the statue. So your brain promotes it to capital all on its own. The same thing happens with Brazil. People say Rio and it's actually Brasilia. With Australia, they say Sydney and it's Canberra. The flashiest city is almost never the capital. New York has the lights, but the power sleeps in Washington. Someone gave you the guru tip. Don't wash them. Just toss them in the freezer. The cold kills the odor-causing bacteria. Basically a lie. The freezer doesn't kill most of those microbes. It just puts them to sleep. As soon as the genes warm back up against your body, the bacteria wake up and get right back to their party. And the smell comes right back. The very researchers who studied this debunked it after the trend went viral. Even a famous jeans brand suggested it and later had to walk it back publicly. Cold doesn't disinfect. It hibernates. If your jeans smell, the only real fix is to wash them, even if it's just once in a while. Ideally in cold water, so they last longer. The freezer is for ice cream, not for your dirty laundry. Going by the names, you'd swear Greenland is a lush paradise, and Iceland, land of ice, is a frozen wasteland. It's almost the exact opposite. Greenland is covered by more than 80% permanent ice sheet. It's one of the coldest, whitest places on the planet. Iceland, on the other hand, is much greener, with a mild coastal climate thanks to ocean currents, full of pastures and fields. As the story goes, the Viking Eric the Red named Greenland green land on purpose, as a marketing trick, to convince other settlers to follow him to that giant ice block. He gave a frozen place a pretty name to sell it better. It was one of the first real estate scams in history. The green name hides the ice, and the icy name hides the green. Someone tells you something strange, and you jump in with "Que bizarro." How bizarre. Badly used. In Spanish, bizarro has always meant brave, gallant, generous. A bizarro soldier was a courageous soldier. The sense of weird or outlandish is a loan from English and French, where bizarre does mean strange. It crept in from watching so many movies and sloppy translations. The Royal Spanish Academy eventually accepted the modern usage since it became so widespread. But the original meaning, the one that's been in Castilian all along, is the brave one. It's one of those words that switched sides through linguistic smuggling. So if you call something super weird bizarro, know that technically you're calling it brave. You just handed out a Medal of Honor without meaning to. You see it glowing furious red in the sky, and your brain assumes it's a blazing planet, almost like an ember. It's the opposite. Mars is a freezer. Its average temperature hovers around -76 degrees Fahrenheit, and at the poles, it drops below -184. So why is it red? Because its surface is literally rusted. Martian soil is loaded with iron oxide, the same chemical reaction that gives color to an old iron gate you left out in the rain. Mars isn't a bonfire, it's a frozen, moldy desert the size of a planet. The Curiosity rover has been driving around up there since 2012, measuring that cold. So next time you see it shining red up above, think of an old rusty fence, not fire. It's oxidized, not lit up. Your grandmother told you 1,000 times, don't cross your legs or you'll get varicose veins. Basically, a myth. Varicose veins show up when the internal valves in your veins fail and blood pools up. And that mostly depends on your genetics, pregnancy, being overweight, and spending long hours standing or sitting without moving. Crossing your legs might raise the pressure a little while you're in that position. And that's it. It doesn't permanently deform your veins. Vascular specialists are pretty clear about this. If your mom and your grandmother have varicose veins, you're more likely to get them whether you cross your legs or not. What actually helps is walking and moving your legs around. So go ahead and uncross away, worry-free. The problem isn't how you sit, it's the genes you inherited. Everyone swears the Mona Lisa's eyes chase you around the room, no matter where you stand. False, and there's some irony to it. In 2019, researchers at Bielefeld University measured the whole thing and found that the Mona Lisa actually isn't looking at you at all. Her gaze is aimed slightly to your right side. There is a real phenomenon where some front-facing portraits seem to follow you, and it's even called the Mona Lisa effect. The joke is that the painting that gave the effect its name doesn't actually pull it off. Leonardo painted her looking just barely off to the side. So if you felt watched at the Louvre, your perception was playing tricks on you. The most famous work tied to the Mona Lisa effect is precisely the one that doesn't look you in the eye. You pour a splash of oil into the pot so the noodles don't stick together. It doesn't do what you think it does. Oil is lighter than water, so it stays floating on top, far from the pasta, which cooks down below. Submerged, it never touches the noodles while they're boiling. The only thing it does is coat them when you drain them. And that's actually where it causes damage, because that greasy film makes the sauce slide right off instead of sticking. Noodles stick together for two real reasons: not enough water and not stirring. Use a big pot with plenty of water and stir at the start. That solves everything. Oil in the water is a pointless gesture that actually ruins your sauce on top of it. Save it for the pan. It doesn't belong in the pot. You say it with all the Catholic faith in the world. Ojala, it turns out well, with no idea where it came from. Surprise! Ojala comes from Arabic, from an expression that can be translated as God willing, if Allah wills it. It entered Spanish during the centuries when much of the Iberian Peninsula was under Muslim rule, and it's stuck around forever in how we express hope. Every time you say Ojalá, you're invoking Allah without realizing it. It's not the only one. Spanish has thousands of words of Arabic origin, like almohada, aceituna, alfombra, or azúcar. Almost all of them starting with al. Language is a sieve of history. You say Ojala 5 times a day and you're making wishes in medieval Arabic without even knowing it. Don't go anywhere, because we're just getting warmed up. In myth number 30, you're going to find out that one of the most famous musical works in history was never actually finished by its own composer. And you probably heard it at a wedding without even realizing it. It's going around everywhere that your eyes are just as big from baby to old age, that they never grow. False. A newborn's eye measures about 16 to 17 millimeters, or roughly 6/10 of an inch, and an adult's reaches about 24 millimeters, or about 9/10 of an inch. That's a big jump, almost 50%, especially in the first years of life. What confuses people is that it looks enormous on a baby's tiny face because the rest of the head still has a lot of growing to do. The eye starts out proportionally large, but it really does keep growing afterward. It's not an optical illusion. The part that barely changes is something else, the cornea. The whole eyeball does grow. Your eyes today are bigger than the ones in your baby photo. They grew right along with you. The mechanic down the block repeats it like a mantra. Every 3,000 miles, no exceptions. That's outdated. That number comes from cars built 40 years ago and old mineral oils. Modern engines running synthetic oil can easily go between 10,000 and 15,000 miles without any trouble, and plenty of manufacturers spell that out in black and white in the owner's manual. Changing it earlier isn't taking care of your car. It's throwing away money and oil. The golden rule isn't some magic number from word of mouth. It's whatever your car's manual says. Look it up in the glove compartment. Your engine doesn't need pampering every 3,000 miles. It needs you to listen to the manufacturer. You see a mushroom sprouting from the ground, sitting quietly, greenery all around, and you lump it in with the plants. False. Mushrooms aren't plants. They form their own separate kingdom, one so distinct that on the tree of life, they're actually closer to animals than to a tree or a head of lettuce. They have no chlorophyll. They don't photosynthesize. They don't make their own food using light. Instead, they feed on organic matter, breaking down whatever's around them, which is actually a lot more like how we eat. The mushroom on your pizza, the mold on bread, and the yeast in beer are all fungi. None of them is a vegetable. Grouping them with plants is a filing error we all picked up in school. A mushroom isn't some distant cousin of parsley. It's more your cousin than the tomato is. You've heard your whole life that pee is sterile, so clean you could even use it to wash a wound in an emergency. False. For decades, people believed this because standard lab cultures didn't detect anything. But in 2014, researchers using more sensitive techniques found entire communities of bacteria living comfortably in the bladder. Even in healthy people, urine was never that pure laboratory-grade liquid we were sold. It has its own microbiome, so that survival tip about peeing on a cut isn't just gross, it's genuinely bad medical advice. You're introducing microbes into an open wound. The clean pee myth fell apart more than 10 years ago. The bladder isn't a sterilized room, it's a neighborhood with residents. Populated, not empty. You put on a tie for a wedding, and you've never once thought about where that word came from. From a country? Necktie in Spanish, corbata, comes from the French cravat, and cravat comes from Croat. In the 17th century, Croatian mercenary soldiers serving France wore a knotted scarf around their necks that caught the attention of the Parisian court. The French loved it, copied it, and named it after the people who wore it, the Croats. From there, it spread across half of Europe and eventually landed in your closet. That means every time you tie on a necktie to look sharp, you're imitating the look of a Croatian mercenary from 400 years ago. The most formal fashion item in the world has a military Balkan origin. It wasn't born in a tailor's shop, it was born on a battlefield. You go around convinced the Earth completes one neat spin every 24 hours flat. Only half true. The Earth actually takes about 23 hours and 56 minutes to fully rotate on its axis. Not 24? The missing 4 minutes happen because on top of rotating, the planet is also moving along its orbit around the Sun, so it has to spin a little bit extra for the Sun to line back up in the same spot in the sky. That 24-hour solar day is actually a convenient average. And on top of that, the rotation is gradually slowing down. Days are getting longer by about a millisecond and a half per century because of the braking effect from the moon. The perfect 24-hour day is a comfortable rounding. The real rotation wraps up 4 minutes early. You scrub the brush like you're sanding a wall, convinced that more force means cleaner teeth. It's the opposite. Brushing with too much pressure wears down the enamel, which never grows back, and damages the gums, which recede over time and leave your teeth more sensitive and exposed. Plaque and tartar are soft. They come off with gentle motions, no brute force needed. Dentists recommend a soft bristle brush and light pressure, barely pressing at all. A lot of electric toothbrushes today even have a sensor that turns red when you press too hard. Scrubbing like a maniac doesn't leave your teeth cleaner, it leaves them more worn down. Technique beats force. Gentle, careful strokes. Not a furious attack twice a day. You throw salt into the pot, hoping it'll come to a boil sooner, while you wait for the pasta. False, and actually the opposite. Adding salt to water raises its boiling point, so technically the water takes a tiny bit longer to boil, not less. With the amount you'd normally use for cooking, the real effect is tiny. A fraction of a degree, you wouldn't even notice it with a stopwatch. So why add salt at all? Just for flavor, so the pasta gets seasoned from the inside. Adding salt before or after doesn't save you a single second of waiting. If you want it to boil faster, put a lid on the pot. That actually does save real time. Salt is for taste, not for speed. You look at corals sitting quietly at the bottom of the sea. shaped like a colorful bush. And you file it away as an underwater plant. False. Coral is an animal. Each piece of coral is actually a colony of thousands of tiny creatures called polyps, relatives of jellyfish and sea anemones, complete with microscopic tentacles for catching food. What looks like a rock or a plant is the hard skeleton those little animals build together, generation after generation. The Great Barrier Reef in Australia is so massive from the buildup of these animals that it can be seen from space, and it's the largest structure ever built by living creatures on the planet. It's not a vegetable or a rock. It's a city built by millions of tiny animals. Coral doesn't grow from the ground, it builds itself. You see a truck with a sign that says flammable, and part of your brain thinks that in prefix in the Spanish word means not, like in incapable or useless. Dangerous mistake. In Spanish, inflammable means it catches fire with tremendous ease. That in isn't negating anything. It comes from the Latin inflammare, meaning to set ablaze, to put into flames. It's an intensifier, not a negation. And to make it even clearer, in English, flammable and inflammable mean exactly the same thing. Both catch fire. There's no safe hidden version tucked inside the prefix. Getting this confused near a propane tank or a fuel tank is one of the worst mix-ups you can make. If the sign says flammable, keep fire away. Don't bring it closer. That prefix isn't protecting you, it's warning you. That tag that says "do not remove under penalty of law" has terrified you since you were a kid. Like ripping it off was some kind of crime. False. That warning, which comes from a law in the United States, isn't aimed at you, the person who bought the pillow. It's aimed at the manufacturer and the seller, so they can't strip out the tag that tells the customer what's inside the filling before the sale. Once the pillow is yours, you can tear off that tag, crumple it up, or even eat it if you want. Absolutely nothing happens. The law protects the buyer from having the filling hidden from them. It doesn't punish you for removing the tag. You spent years obeying an order that was never meant for you. That tag is a warning for the store, not for your house. Rip it off, you're free. Your mucus turns green or yellow, and you immediately run off asking for antibiotics. Sure, it's a bacterial infection. False. The green color isn't put there by bacteria, it's put there by your own army. When your immune system sends in cells called neutrophils to fight something off, they release an iron-containing enzyme that tints the mucus greenish. In other words, the color is a sign that you're fighting something, whether it's a virus or bacteria, not a sign of what's causing it. Most colds are viral, and in that case, antibiotics do absolutely nothing except kill off good bacteria for no reason. Only a doctor, looking at the full picture, can decide if you actually need them. Green mucus isn't a green light for self-medicating. It's your body hard at work, not a prescription request. You turn on the tap and wait for it to run good and hot to kill the microbes. A lie. And on top of that, you're wasting water and energy for nothing. To actually kill bacteria with heat, you'd need a temperature that would scald your skin. Basically boiling water. Impossible to tolerate. At the temperature your hands can actually handle. Cold water and hot water clean exactly the same. Studies and health guidelines are clear on this. What removes germs is soap, friction, and time. About 20 seconds of good scrubbing. Temperature barely makes a difference. You can wash with cold water with zero guilt. It's not the heat that cleans, it's the soap and the time you put into it. Scrub for 20 seconds and you're set. No need to burn your hands for nothing. We take it for granted that Columbus discovered America, and that's why the continent bears some kind of tribute to him. Double lie. He neither discovered an empty continent, millions of people already lived here, nor does the continent carry his name. America is named after another navigator, Amerigo Vespucci, who was the one who realized these lands weren't Asia, as Columbus believed, but a new continent unknown to Europe. In 1507, a German cartographer named Martin Waldseemüller drew a map and named these lands America in honor of Amerigo. The name caught on and stuck forever. Columbus died convinced he had reached the Indies. The one who understood what this actually was is the one who got to name it. America was named after Amerigo, not Christopher. You listen to that solemn requiem and assume it's 100% Mozart from the first note to the last. Incomplete. Mozart died in 1791 with the piece only half finished. He was sick, writing it on commission, and death caught up with him before he could complete it. A large portion was left unfinished. His widow, who needed to collect payment for the commission, handed it over to a student, Franz Xaver Süssmayr, who pieced together the sketches and completed what was missing by imitating the master's style. In other words, the requiem that plays in so many movies, and even at some funerals, is a four-handed work, half genius, half diligent student. The most famous funeral piece in history was finished by someone else. Rushed along by a debt that needed settling. An assistant closed it out, not the genius. Your uncle swears that an automatic transmission guzzles gas and that manual always gets better mileage. That's no longer true. That held for old automatic transmissions, heavy ones with only a few gears. Modern ones have 6, 8 or more speeds, torque converters that lock up to avoid wasting energy. And they often match or even beat the fuel consumption of a manual car. Today, the computer shifts gears at the optimal moment better than most drivers ever could. The manual's advantage is a thing of the past, back when the technology was different. So if you're avoiding an automatic out of fear over gas mileage, you're fighting a war that's already over. Fuel consumption isn't decided by the transmission, it's decided by how new the car is. We've got it stuck in our heads that the moon rules the night and the sun rules the day, each on its own shift. Incomplete. The moon is visible during the day a whole lot, pale and whitish against the blue sky, more often than you'd think. In fact, for a good chunk of the month, there are stretches where you can see it perfectly clearly while the sun is still up. It doesn't shine with its own light, it reflects the sun's. So as long as it's above the horizon and not washed out by the glare, there it is. What happens is that during the day, you're just not looking for it. You're looking down. Look up in the middle of the afternoon. The moon doesn't only clock in at night, it works a split shift. There's a home remedy going around about rubbing lemon or baking soda with lemon on your teeth to make them pearly white. Terrible idea. Lemon is pure acid, and that acid doesn't whiten. What it does is corrode the enamel, the hard layer that protects your teeth. By wearing down that translucent layer, it exposes the layer underneath, which is yellowish, so over time it actually leaves your teeth more yellow, not whiter, on top of making them more sensitive and fragile. And enamel, once it wears away, never grows back. It's like sanding down a wall to paint it and ending up putting a hole through it instead. Real teeth whitening is done with other products under professional supervision. Save the lemon for lemonade, not for your smile. That home remedy ruins your teeth. Back in kindergarten, you were taught that mixing red, yellow, and blue gives you every color. That's outdated. That model is taught in school out of habit. But it isn't actually correct. When we're talking about light, like the light from your screen, the primary colors are red, green, and blue, the famous RGB. And mixing them together creates white. When we're talking about ink, like the ink in a printer, the real primary colors are cyan, magenta, and yellow, the CMY system. The common red and blue are actually mixtures. That's why your printer doesn't come stocked with red or blue ink. It comes with magenta and cyan. School taught you a simplified, somewhat wrong version. The real base colors aren't the ones from kindergarten, they're the ones from the ink cartridge. You pull the steak out of the freezer in the morning and leave it on the counter all day to thaw on its own. Dangerous. Bacteria multiply like crazy in what's called the danger zone, between 40 and 140 degrees Fahrenheit. While the outside of the meat warms up in the air, it turns into a breeding ground for microbes, even while the center is still frozen. By the time you cook it, they've already multiplied a lot. The right way to do it is to thaw it in the bottom of the fridge with plenty of time, or in the microwave if you're going to cook it right away. Or inside a bag submerged in cold water that you keep changing. Never out in the open air. A warm counter is a party for bacteria. Thaw in the cold, not at a room temperature. Patience here is safety. Hold on a second, here's a preview. In myth number 49, you're going to find out that the word you say every time you answer the phone almost ended up being something completely different, and it was a hugely famous inventor who picked it. Almost by chance. You quote the line in the present tense like some kind of eternal truth, life is like a box of chocolates. Misquoted. In the movie, the character says it in the past tense. He says his mom used to tell him that life was like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're gonna get. It's a memory of his mother, not a proclamation he's making to the world. It seems like a tiny detail, but it changes the meaning from a personal piece of motherly advice to an almanac-style motivational quote. It's one of those lines pop culture polishes up until it's smoother and rounder for a mug or a fridge magnet. The original has an owner and a verb tense. It wasn't a philosophy, it was what his mom used to tell him. And it was in the past tense. The T-Rex on screen lets out that giant roar that makes your popcorn shake, and you took it as fact. A sound designer's lie. There's no evidence that dinosaurs roared like lions. Their closest living relatives are birds and crocodiles, and based on how their throats were built, they most likely made low sounds with their mouths closed, more like deep rumbles, coos, or hisses. Way less cinematic. The famous Jurassic Park roar was built by mixing sounds from several animals like a baby elephant, a tiger, and even the sound designer's own dog. It's sound design, not science. That awesome bellow that gives you chills came out of an editing booth, not out of a dinosaur's throat. The T-Rex might have sounded more like a giant pigeon than a beast. Less roar, more terrifying purr. You were raised to make your bed right away, neat and tidy, the second your feet hit the floor. Surprise! While you sleep, you sweat and release moisture. And that moisture gets trapped in the sheets and the mattress. Millions of dust mites live in there, those microscopic bugs that feed on your dead skin. If you cover the bed right away, you're giving them the perfect environment. A study out of Kingston University suggested that leaving the bed unmade for a while, letting it air out, lets the sheets dry out and makes it harder for the mites to survive. In other words, an unmade bed for a little while can actually be more hygienic. Open the window, let it air out, and make the bed afterward. Instant tidiness feeds the mites. Let it breathe first. You look at the blue ocean and assume it's just a giant mirror copying the sky's color. False. If it were only a reflection. On a gray day, the ocean would be uniformly gray, and that's not always what happens. The water is blue on its own. When sunlight, which is white and carries every color, enters the water, the molecules absorb more of the warm tones, the reds and oranges, and let the blue pass through and bounce back. The more water the light passes through, the bluer it looks, which is why deep ocean water looks intensely blue, even though a glass of that same water looks clear. It's not the sky's makeup, it's the chemistry of light. The water holds onto the red and gives you back the blue. The color belongs to the water, it's not borrowed. Someone once told you that saying vos tienes instead of tu tienes is speaking incorrectly. Second-rate Spanish. Completely false. Voseo is a fully legitimate, completely correct form of Spanish, just as valid as using tu. It's used naturally by roughly a third of Spanish speakers, not just in Argentina and Uruguay, but also across much of Central America and other regions. The Royal Spanish Academy itself recognizes it without any issue as part of the language. It's not some deformation, it's a variant with centuries of history behind it, coming from old forms of address in classic Castilian Spanish. Speaking with vos doesn't make you uneducated, it makes you Rioplatense. Spanish doesn't have one single correct mold dictated from a single place. You speak just fine. Whoever corrects your vosio is the one who's wrong. You build a password with an @ sign, symbols, capital letters, and impossible to remember numbers. Sure, it's the strongest one in the universe. Only half true. Security experts, including the institute that sets the standards in the United States, have flipped that advice on its head. A long password, even if it's an easy-to-remember phrase made up of several words, is much harder to crack than a short jumble of symbols. What actually gives a computer trouble is the number of characters, the length. not how strange it looks. Even worse, forcing people to include symbols makes everyone rely on the same predictable tricks, like swapping the letter edge for an @ sign. A long phrase beats a short cryptic puzzle. In security, length matters more than disguise. You wash your face with hot water to open your pores and then with cold to close them back up. An anatomical lie. The pores in your skin don't have muscles. They're not little hinged doors that open and close on command based on temperature. They're fixed openings where oil and sweat come out. Cold water can give you a nice sensation and tighten your skin a bit for a while, but it doesn't close any pores, simply because there's nothing there to close. What makes a pore look bigger is the amount of oil and dead skin cells built up in it, not whether you used cold or hot water. This whole open and close routine is a myth from cosmetics advertising. Pores aren't windows. The faucet doesn't open or close them. The old grandma trick: you throw a noodle at the wall, and if it sticks, it's done. False, and it makes a mess of your kitchen on top of it. An overcooked noodle turned to mush also sticks to the wall, because what makes it stick is the sticky starch on the outside, not whether the inside is at the right point. In other words, the test can confirm just about anything, including ruined pasta. The only reliable way to know if it's ready is the most obvious one. Grab a piece, blow on it, and taste it. It should have that slight resistance when you bite into it. The famous al dente. The wall doesn't know anything about cooking. It only knows if something is sticky. Stop decorating your tiles with noodles and put one in your mouth instead. Your palate never lies. The wall always does. You imagine that someday the sun is going to burst into a massive supernova, and that's it for the solar system. False. The sun doesn't have anywhere near enough mass for that. Supernovas happen to stars that are much bigger and heavier. What actually awaits the sun in about 5 billion years is something else. It's going to swell up into an enormous red giant, so big it will likely swallow up Mercury, Venus, and possibly Earth. Afterward, it will gently shed its outer layers and end up as a small, hot core called a white dwarf, which will slowly cool down over billions and billions of years. No epic explosion. The sun's ending isn't a blast. It's a slow, glowing deflation. It fades out. It doesn't blow up. You're told that vinyl sounds purer and more faithful than any digital format, that it's uncut, unfiltered sound. Only half true. What you like about vinyl is real, but it's not fidelity, it's character. Vinyl has real physical limitations, less dynamic range than a good digital file, surface noise, and near the end of a side the sound loses definition, because the needle covers less ground per rotation. That warmth everyone praises so much is partly those imperfections and a different kind of mastering, not a cleaner signal. In fact, plenty of new vinyl records are pressed straight from a digital file. In other words, vinyl sounds different and often nicer, but not technically more accurate. You fall in love with the flaw, not the fidelity. It sounds like nostalgia, not superiority. You wake up to a frosted over windshield. You're in a hurry, and you grab the kettle to pour hot water on the glass to melt the ice fast. Terrible idea. That sudden temperature swing from frozen to boiling in a second creates stress that can crack the windshield instantly, especially if it already had a tiny chip. The glass expands suddenly and can't handle it. What you should use is slightly lukewarm water, or simply a scraper with some patience. It's the same principle behind why a glass cup can shatter if you pour boiling water into it while it's cold. Thermal shock is glass's enemy. Trying to save 2 minutes could end up costing you an entire new windshield. You beat the ice slowly, not with brute force. You look at a smooth yellow flower and assume the bee sees the exact same thing you do. False! Bees can see a part of the spectrum that's invisible to us, ultraviolet light. And plenty of flowers have patterns drawn in ultraviolet, lines and marks that work like a landing strip, pointing the bee exactly to where the nectar is. To our eyes, that flower is one even petal. To the bee, it's a glowing sign with arrows saying right this way. The flower and the insect communicate on a secret channel that we can't even perceive. There's an entire floral decoration scheme built specifically for eyes that aren't ours. When you look at a garden, You're only seeing half the show. Flowers have signs posted, just not for you. That move of pressing the gas pedal a few times before turning the key, like your dad used to do, doesn't do anything anymore. It's outdated. That made sense in carbureted cars, where pumping the pedal loaded a bit of extra fuel so a cold engine would start. But for decades, cars have had electronic fuel injection, with a computer that handles sending the exact fuel and air mixture on its own based on the temperature. Pressing the gas pedal before starting a modern car doesn't do anything useful, and in some cases, it can even flood the engine or waste fuel for nothing. All you have to do is turn the key or press the button. The electronics take care of the rest. That inherited ritual no longer applies. Your car figures out the mixture on its own. Leave the gas pedal alone and just start the car. You pick up the phone and say hello without even thinking about it, like it was always that way. Interesting bit of history. When the telephone was first coming into use, there was no fixed greeting for answering it. And there was actual debate about it. Alexander Graham Bell, who had a lot to do with the invention, proposed answering with ahoy, the word sailors use. But Thomas Edison pushed for hello, and that one won out and spread across the entire world, morphing along the way. If history had gone the other way, today you'd be answering your cell phone, shouting ahoy like a pirate. A word so automatic that we say it millions of times a day was basically decided out of stubbornness between two feuding inventors. The telephone greeting is the child of an argument. Edison won, the ship lost. If you skip a day without going to the bathroom, you already feel backed up and think something's wrong. False. The normal range is huge. Anywhere from 3 times a day to 3 times a week, depending on your body, your diet, how much water you drink, and how much you move around. There's no universal rule of once a day for everybody. That's made up. Someone can go every other day their entire life and be perfectly healthy. What matters isn't the exact frequency, but that it's your usual rhythm and that it doesn't hurt or give you trouble. A sudden, sustained change is worth checking with a doctor, but skipping one day isn't being constipated. Your gut has its own schedule. Don't force it to clock in every day like it's at the office. You see a used bar of soap sitting on the edge of the sink and it grosses you out. You figure it's infected and dirtier than actually washing with it. False. Back in 1988, a famous study intentionally coated bars of soap with bacteria, had people wash their hands with them, and measured their hands afterward. Not enough microbes transferred to matter. Soap, by its very nature, carries away dirt and rinses itself off with every use. The few germs left on the surface don't jump onto your clean hands. You can use the same bar of soap as the rest of your family without any worry. Soap is designed to get rid of grime, starting with its own. It washes itself while it washes you. Don't be disgusted by the thing that's cleaning you. You picture it as a smooth, perfectly round ball hanging in space. Incomplete. The Earth spins, and that spin puffs it out in the middle the way dough spreads out at the sides when you need it. It's what's called an oblate spheroid. The diameter measured at the equator is about 27 miles bigger than the one measured from pole to pole. That's why, technically, the point on the surface farthest from the planet's center isn't Everest. It's a volcano in Ecuador called Chimborazo, because it sits right on that bulging waistline of the globe. The Earth is round, yes, but it's a ball with a belly. It spins so much it grew a little roll around its middle. You go to the gas station, look at the number stamped on the side of the tire, and inflate it up to that. Wrong! That number isn't the recommended pressure. It's the maximum pressure the tire can handle without bursting. Using it leaves your tire way too hard, gives you less grip on the road, wears down unevenly in the center, and brakes worse. The correct pressure is set by the car's manufacturer, and it's almost always on a sticker inside the driver's door frame or in the owner's manual, usually at a noticeably lower number. Every car has its own number based on its weight. Overinflating isn't playing it safe. It's driving around on 2 balloons about to pop. The number that matters isn't on the tire, it's on your door. You're washing dishes, and if it doesn't build up a mountain of suds, you feel like it's not cleaning, like it's lacking power. Marketing lie. Foam doesn't wash anything. What actually removes the grease are molecules called surfactants, which can work perfectly well with almost no bubbles at all. Foam is purely a visual effect. Brands add foaming agents on purpose because they know customers associate foam with cleanliness and buy happier. It's even clearer with laundry. Low foam detergents clean just as well or better, and extra foam in a washing machine can actually cause problems, so don't judge by the bubbles. A good detergent with low foam can leave everything spotless. The white mountain is for your eyes, not for the grease. The surfactant does the cleaning, not the bubble. You shower and lather up your scalp with shampoo religiously every single day, convinced that otherwise your hair will look dirty and gross. It's not quite like that. Your scalp produces a natural oil that protects and moisturizes it. If you hit it with strong shampoo every day, you strip that oil away completely and can leave your scalp dry and irritated. Oil production mostly depends on your hormones, not on how much you wash, so washing more doesn't improve it. It just irritates it. Dermatologists say the right frequency depends on each person's hair and scalp, but that for most people daily washing isn't necessary, and it's often better to space it out. It's not a universal daily rule. Just rinsing with water and no shampoo also cleans quite a bit. Washing less can actually mean healthier hair. It's not cleaner, it's just more stressed out. You see the little bar on your phone showing 4G or 5G, and you think that G stands for gigabytes, for speed, or for data. False. That G stands for generation. 4G is the fourth generation of mobile network technology, and 5G is the fifth. It's a label for how new the system your phone uses to connect actually is, not a measurement of how much data you have left. Each generation brought huge leaps. The first was analog and just for calls. Then came text messages, then internet, then smooth video. The gigabytes on your plan are a completely different thing. So when you see 5G, your phone isn't telling you how much speed you have. It's telling you it's running on 5th generation technology. It's a version number, not a fuel gauge. You scrape yourself, and your lifelong reflex is to pour hydrogen peroxide or alcohol on it to disinfect. Basically a myth and actually counterproductive. Hydrogen peroxide does bubble, yes, but while it kills off some germs, it also burns and destroys the healthy cells that are trying to close the wound. It ends up slowing down healing instead of helping it. Same goes for alcohol, which stings and damages the new tissue. What doctors recommend today is about as boring as it gets. Wash with clean water or saline solution, a bit of mild soap around the area, and cover it up. No dramatic fizzing needed. That satisfying bubbling is partly your own healthy skin suffering. A wound doesn't heal through spectacle, it heals with water and patience. Save the peroxide for bleaching your hair. You sit in the back seat of the car and don't buckle up because nothing happens back there. Extremely dangerous lie. In a crash, a backseat passenger without a seatbelt goes flying forward with the force of several times their own body weight, becoming a projectile that can kill the person sitting in front, on top of killing themselves against the seats. Numerous road safety studies show that riding without a seatbelt in the back multiplies the risk of death. Both your own and other people's. The seat back in front of you doesn't stop you, it hurts you. Physics doesn't care which seat you're in. Inertia launches you all the same. The back seat doesn't make you immune. It makes you a loose body waiting for a sudden stop. Buckle up always, in any seat. The back seat belt saves lives too, starting with the person sitting up front. Someone says almondiga instead of albondiga, meatball, and everyone laughs and corrects them like they're an idiot. Uncomfortable surprise. Almondiga actually appears in the Royal Spanish Academy's dictionary, listed as an old, popular form of the word. It's not that some uneducated person made it up yesterday. It's a variant that has existed in everyday speech for centuries. Now, careful. Just because it's in the dictionary doesn't mean it's the recommended way to speak or write correctly. In fact, it's labeled as vulgar and outdated, so on a test you should use albondiga. But saying it doesn't exist is a stretch. It exists, it's on record, it just fell out of fashion. Making fun of someone who says it is making fun of old Castilian Spanish. Almendiga is albondiga, with history behind it. Don't move. Because in myth number 69, I'm going to take apart something you do every single afternoon with your kettle. A classic Argentine habit you've been doing wrong since your very first mate. You walk into a public restroom, see the hand dryer, and think it's the cleanest option because you don't touch anything. It's the opposite. Several studies found that air dryers, especially the powerful jet ones, lift up and scatter around the whole room. The microbes left on poorly rinsed hands, along with germs already floating around in the bathroom air. One study measured that jet dryers can disperse far more particles than paper towels. In some cases, hundreds of times more. Paper towels, on the other hand, remove water and germs through friction and throw them straight into the trash, without blasting them into the air. In other words, the most hygienic option is still the oldest one: paper wins. The dryer dries your hands and perfumes the bathroom with bacteria. Everyone says that in the middle of summer you have to wear white because black absorbs heat and roasts you. Only half true. It's true that black absorbs more solar radiation than white, but there's a detail that changes everything. If the clothing is loose and there's even a slight breeze, the heat that the black fabric absorbs dissipates through convection before it ever reaches your skin. In fact, a classic study published in the journal Nature looked at the black robes worn by Bedouins out in the desert and found they weren't any hotter than white ones, thanks precisely to the air circulating underneath. The key isn't just the color, it's how loose the garment is and whether there's any wind. Loose black clothing can be just as cool as white. It's not just the color, it's the cut. You picture two galaxies colliding as a brutal pileup of stars smashing into each other. False! A galaxy is overwhelmingly empty space. Stars are spaced so incredibly far apart that when two galaxies cross paths and merge, the odds of two stars actually colliding head-on are basically zero. It's estimated that in a few billion years, our Milky Way is going to merge with the Andromeda Galaxy. And even so, astronomers estimate that not a single individual star is going to crash into another. They'll pass through each other like two flocks crossing paths without touching. What does change is the shape of the galaxies due to gravity. A galaxy collision is a hug, not an accident. They pass one right through the other. You were taught that ice is slippery because your weight presses down on it and melts it just a little, forming a thin film of water. False, or at least seriously incomplete. That pressure explanation doesn't come anywhere close to explaining why you slip. A person's weight only melts ice by a tiny fraction of a degree, and yet you slip even at 4 below 0 Fahrenheit, where that pressure wouldn't melt anything. What's actually happening is that the surface of ice always has an extremely thin layer that behaves like a liquid, almost like water, even while everything underneath stays solidly frozen. That layer is already there before you ever step on it. And on top of that, when you slide, the friction generates heat and thickens that layer even more. Your weight doesn't melt it. It's slippery because of that combination of the surface layer and friction. Ice comes slippery, straight from the factory. A lot of people are afraid of lightning rods because they think they attract storms and cause more lightning to strike the house. It's the opposite of what it actually does. A lightning rod doesn't call in lightning or invite it. What it does is offer a safe path down to the ground without damaging the building. If lightning is going to strike that area, which was going to happen either way, the lightning rod catches it at the tip and guides it through a direct cable into the ground, away from the walls, the wiring, and the people. It's an emergency slide for electricity, not a magnet. Without a lightning rod, that same bolt would strike anyway, just uncontrolled. And that's when it causes real disaster. Benjamin Franklin designed it specifically to protect, not to attract. It doesn't summon the storm. It just gives the lightning a safe way to leave. You buy the soap labeled antibacterial thinking it kills more germs and protects your family better. Basically, a lie. In 2016, the United States Drug Regulatory Agency directly banned a series of antibacterial ingredients in consumer soaps. Like triclosan? Because there was no evidence they were any better than regular soap at preventing illness. And there were concerns about their long-term effects and about bacterial resistance. In other words, for everyday use, good old-fashioned soap plus water and scrubbing does the job just as well. The word antibacterial on the label is mostly marketing. You don't need a chemical warfare soap to wash your hands. Regular soap already does the work. The antibacterial label takes your money, not your germs. You see those tall, hard, woody stalks of bamboo and obviously classify it as a tree. False. Bamboo is a grass. Yes, a giant relative of the grass in your yard, and of weight, part of the grass family. It doesn't have a woody trunk like an oak. It has those hollow, segmented stalks typical of grasses, just grown to an extreme scale. And it's one of the fastest growing plants in the world. Some species can grow almost 3 feet in a single day. When you see a panda chewing on bamboo, it's actually grazing, eating an extremely tall grass. Bamboo isn't wood, it's grass with delusions of being a tree, a weed that made it to the clouds. It's a brutally hot day and someone gets the bright idea to leave the fridge door open to cool down the room. You're achieving the exact opposite. A refrigerator doesn't create cold out of nowhere. What it does is pull the heat out from the inside and dump it outside through that grill or coil on the back. If you leave it open, the motor works itself to death trying to cool the entire kitchen, which it's never going to manage. And on top of that, it releases more heat out the back than it removes from the front. Add in the heat from the overworked motor itself, and the end result is that the room ends up hotter, not cooler. It's a heat pump, not an air conditioner. Close it, the fridge cools down a closed compartment, not an open room. Leave it open and you're basically heating your kitchen. You spray a bit, press one wrist against the other, and rub them together proudly. The opposite of what's recommended. That rubbing generates heat through friction, and that heat speeds up the evaporation of the most delicate notes. The top notes, the first ones you smell. The result is that the scent fades away much faster. Perfumers repeat this over and over. You're supposed to spray it and let it dry on its own on the skin, without touching it. Heat ruins it. It's like grabbing a freshly finished drawing and running your hand over it before the ink dries. You're smudging it, not setting it. If you want your perfume to last all afternoon, leave it alone. Rubbing doesn't activate it, it just makes it evaporate faster. You put the kettle on to boil like crazy and use that bubbling water to brew your mate, just like you've done your whole life. Serious mistake. Boiling water at 212 degrees Fahrenheit scorches the yerba, strips out everything good all at once, and leaves you with a bitter mate that's washed out fast and tastes burnt. The ideal temperature is quite a bit below boiling, somewhere around 167 to 176 degrees Fahrenheit, right when the kettle starts making a little noise but hasn't fully boiled yet. That moment when the first tiny bubbles show up at the bottom, just before it hits a full boil. At that temperature, the yerba releases its flavor gradually, and the mate lasts through many more refills. If your mate comes out bitter and doesn't last, it's not the yerba's fault. It's that you killed it with boiling water. Mate should be treated with hot water, never boiling. You leave bread out, it goes hard. And you assume, of course, it dried out. It lost its water. Incomplete. Bread goes stale mainly because of a chemical process called starch retrogradation, where the starch molecules, which were disordered and soft right after baking, gradually rearrange themselves and harden over time, even while the bread still holds onto moisture. Here's the proof that will blow your mind. Bread goes stale faster in the fridge than it does out on the counter, because the cold actually speeds up that starch rearrangement. Yes, storing bread in the refrigerator is one of the worst things you can do. If you want it to last, freeze it solid, don't put it in the fridge. It's not that it dries out, it's that the starch reorganizes itself, and the cold from the fridge speeds that up instead of preventing it. And that's a wrap. A full hour of lies you've carried around your whole life, and today they got smashed to pieces. Give me a like, subscribe, and hit that bell so you don't miss the next round, because there are plenty more myths where these came from. Bye, and now you know where that word comes from.